Welcome! This video gives an overview of my recent paper published in Foundations and Trends in Entrepreneurship entitled Lumps, Bumps and Jumps in the Firm Growth Process. Firm growth is a central topic in entrepreneurship research. There are already many good literature review papers out there on firm growth, but this video focuses on the lumpy nature of growth, focusing on the discontinuities in the growth process. The standard approach for empirical work is to take annual growth as the dependent variable and to explain this using a long list of explanatory variables such as size, age, legal form, profits, innovation, sector dummies, region dummies, and so on. For example, much of the literature focuses on Gibrat's law, which essentially investigates if growth rate is independent of size, i.e. whether the parameter beta 1 shown in this equation is equal to 0. In recent times, interest has shifted from investigating how much firms grow to focusing on how firms grow. McKelvey and Wicklund 2010 mainly discussed the how in terms of growth modes, organic versus acquisitive growth, franchises, alliances, etc. Whereas this video discusses how firms grow by focusing on the discontinuous and lumpy nature of growth. Growth is often episodic, discontinuous, and brings about qualitative transformations within growing firms. The rest of the video will look at the following themes: stages of growth models, growth modes and growth strategies, growth thresholds, and the Penrosian idea of resources that are lumpy and discrete, growth rates distributions that are lumpy and also well approximated by the Laplace distribution, and also some results emerging from empirical analysis: high growth firms, regularities in growth paths of firms, growth spells, growth spikes, and changes in firms' organization that accompany growth. When it comes to the growth of humans, we usually pass through several recognizable stages that are generally predetermined by genes, hormones, and biological factors such as learning to speak, primary teeth emerging before being replaced by permanent teeth, puberty, hair loss, and so on. Are there similar stages in the growth of firms? Many researchers have sought to investigate this. A prominent example is Greiner's model, where firms pass through stages of evolution and revolution as they grow. In Greiner's model, we follow the case of a small young firm that starts out as an informal team but soon faces problems as it grows too big to be managed single-handedly by the founding entrepreneur. If the firm introduces a capable manager, it can enjoy a period of sustained growth. A crisis of autonomy may then appear, however, as employees are torn between following new bureaucratic procedures and taking their own initiative, known as a crisis of autonomy that is resolved by promoting delegation in the context of a decentralized organizational structure. As the firm implements delegation, however, the top management may worry that it is losing control, and so on. It is easy to appreciate the guiding intuition and the popular appeal behind these stages of growth models. If you take them too seriously, however, you will find many problems with these simple models, such as having crises that repeat themselves, happen in parallel, or that never seem to appear. Growth can take place through various growth modes or growth strategies, the simplest of which is growth by replication or growth by more of the same. This involves producing a larger quantity by applying existing routines and drawing on existing slack resources within the organization to accommodate the increased production targets. Growth by replication can often take place as a smooth expansion. Other growth strategies such as diversification, exporting, mergers and acquisitions, and franchising and strategic alliances may correspond to a lumpier type of growth. Recent research has investigated the existence of thresholds which hold back firm growth. In France, for example, there is a threshold at 50 employees where employment protection legislation brings considerable new obligations for firms. Firms may therefore prefer to stay at a size below 50 employees. Empirical analysis shows that there are more than twice as many firms with 49 employees compared to 50 employees, as firms try to avoid passing this threshold. Other research into the thresholds affecting firm growth due to employment protection legislation include an analysis of the 15 employee threshold in Italy and the 11 employee threshold in Sweden. Edith Penrose, in her famous 1959 book, The Theory of the Growth of the Firm, discussed the idea that firms are composed of resources that are lumpy and discrete. To some extent, there are indivisibilities affecting growth, such that firms cannot buy half a machine, half a patent, or develop half a product. The indivisible nature of these resources has implications for growth. Consider this simple example where a firm is composed of supervisors and production workers. Supervisors have a span of control that is equal to 3. In some cases, the addition of a production worker can draw on the managerial attention of a supervisor who is not yet operating at capacity limits. In other cases, adding a production worker has cascading knock-on effects that trigger further growth, such as the hiring of further supervisors, renting more office space, buying more machines, and so on. Adding a unit of production capacity has non-constant marginal costs that depend upon the degree of capacity utilization in the organization. When a firm hits a wall, or a threshold, or reaches a critical state of high capacity utilization, adding an extra unit may be much more expensive than during times of low capacity utilization. An important feature of firm growth is that the growth rates distribution is not a normal distribution or Gaussian distribution, but is a heavy-tailed distribution. In technical terms, we speak of the Laplace distribution, also known as a symmetric exponential distribution. A Laplace distribution, when plotted with a logarithmic x-axis, corresponds to two straight lines of negative slope, giving rise to the term tent-shaped distribution. When compared to the Gaussian or normal distribution, the Laplace has more weight in the center and more weight in the tails. Empirical analysis into the lumpy nature of firm growth has taken place along various lines. First, we can mention work on high-growth firms, which according to the best-known definition are firms that have at least 10 employees in the initial period and an average of at least 20% growth per year over a 3-year period. High-growth firms are often considered to be a distinct category from other firms. Second, we can mention research into growth paths, which investigates the patterns in firms' growth trajectories, often trying to arrange the observed growth paths into taxonomies. Third is the phenomenon of growth spells, which are indicators of the number of consecutive periods of relatively high growth that firms can achieve, such as a growth spell of 3 years, 5 years, or 10 years. Fourth, research has focused on investment spikes and growth spikes. Investment spikes correspond to periods in which a burst of investment activity takes place in a short period of time, such as 1 year. This corresponds to the rare large event of building a new production plant, for example. Investment spikes have been observed to lead to higher sales and employment in the following years. Fifth, we can mention some fascinating empirical work that looks at how the reorganization of tasks and hierarchical layers within firms occurs alongside and also causes firm growth. Caliendo and colleagues present some fascinating results from a detailed analysis of firms that add a new hierarchical layer of middle management. In the example shown here, the introduction of a hierarchical layer allows the firm to expand its scale of output, as shown by a strong growth in the quantity sold. However, the growth of output floods the market and saturates demand to the extent that the price of the goods sold actually decreases. The combined effect of these two forces is that revenue increases, but at a lower rate than the increase in quantity produced. Let me end this presentation with a quote from Cunningham's book on econometrics. Jumps are so unnatural that when we see them happen, they beg for explanation. Charles Darwin, in his On the Origin of Species, summarized this by saying, "Natura non facit saltum," or nature does not make jumps. I hope that future research in the area of firm growth will make progress by paying special attention to the lumps and discontinuities in the growth process that have such a disproportionately large effect on firm growth, industry evolution, and the economy in general. Thank you for listening. Have a good day.